Story 1. The Haunting of the Dual Shadows. I've always been fascinated by the paranormal, but this time, it hit a little too close to home. Sit tight and brace yourselves for a spine-tingling tale that will leave you questioning your own reality. It all began on a stormy night when I decided to spend the evening alone at my secluded cabin in the woods. The rain pelted against the windows, creating an eerie ambience that sent shivers down my spine. But little did I know, this would be the least of my worries. As I sat in the dimly lit living room, I noticed something peculiar. I was casting not one but two shadows on the wall. My heart skipped a beat, and I couldn't help but feel a growing unease creep over me. The room was only lit by a single lamp, so how was this possible? Curiosity and fear battled within me as I got up to investigate. I scrutinized every inch of the room, searching for a logical explanation. But no matter where I moved or how I adjusted the lamp, the unnerving sight persisted. It was as if there was an invisible presence lurking, mocking me with its cryptic manifestation. As the night wore on, the atmosphere in the cabin grew increasingly oppressive. Shadows danced eerily across the walls, and I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. Every creak and whisper sent a jolt of terror through my veins. It was as if the darkness itself hungered for my sanity. Unable to endure the torment any longer, I decided to confront the source of this inexplicable phenomenon head-on. Armed with a flashlight and trembling with anticipation, I made my way to the attic, the epicenter of strange happenings in the cabin. As I climbed the dusty stairs, the air grew thick and suffocating. My heart pounded against my chest, drowning out the sound of the thunderstorm outside. With each step, the duality of my shadows grew more pronounced, haunting me with their enigmatic presence. As I reached the attic door, a powerful gust of wind slammed it shut behind me. I stood there, frozen in fear, surrounded by a darkness so profound it seemed alive. The flashlight flickered, casting distorted shadows that writhed and contorted with malicious intent. Then, a voice, an otherworldly whisper, echoed through the attic, chilling me to my very core. "Embrace the darkness," it hissed, sending icy tendrils of dread down my spine. The walls seemed to close in, and I realized I had walked into a trap, a twisted game played by forces beyond my comprehension. In a desperate bid for escape, I mustered the courage to reach out and turn the attic doorknob. With a loud creak, the door swung open, revealing a blinding light. As I stumbled back into the safety of the living room, the duality of my shadows vanished, leaving me gasping for air. The cabin fell silent as if the supernatural turmoil had never occurred. But the memories of that fateful night still haunt me to this day. I am left with more questions than answers, forever tormented by the inexplicable dual shadows and the sinister presence that lurked within those walls. Story 2. Meeting with a mysterious woman. So it was around 11 p.m., and I decided to take a stroll around my block. I live in a pretty safe town, and the night was beautiful, so I thought, why not? Little did I know, things were about to take a creepy turn. About 15 minutes into my walk, I spotted this pale woman with blonde hair and a white dress across the street. She seemed harmless, about my age, and just caught my attention. Initially, I didn't pay much heed to her and continued walking. But here's where it gets strange. As I made another lap around the block, I noticed she was now on the same street, just a few feet ahead of me. She was standing by the curb, fixated on the passing cars. It struck me odd, considering the late hour, but I decided to approach her and said hello. That's when things took a seriously eerie turn. She turned her gaze towards me, and I kid you not, her eyes were devoid of any color or pupils. It was as if I was staring into a void. Freaked out, I mustered up the courage to ask if she was all right. But she didn't respond. Instead, she just pointed at the road. I was utterly confused and clueless about what she meant. Suddenly a black car appeared down the road, and before I could react, this woman stepped right into its path. The impact was horrifying, and blood splattered everywhere. The driver, a man in his mid-20s, immediately stopped and rushed out of the car. We were both in complete shock, trying to make sense of the situation. He called the police, while I went around the car to assess the girl's condition. But when I reached the other side, she was gone. Poof! vanished into thin air, like she was never there. And to my bewilderment, the blood on the road had vanished as well, although it was still there in the driver's car. When the police arrived, they brushed it off as some sick prank by kids who didn't know any better, along with the guy playing along. They even concluded that the blood on the car was just paint. No further investigation, no explanation whatsoever. Now I'm left grappling with reality. Was this all a dream? Or did it happen? It felt so real. Story 3. Chilling subway encounter. It was a regular Tuesday evening. I had finished my work for the day and hopped on the subway to head back home. Little did I know that this would be no ordinary ride. So there I was, minding my own business, when I managed to snag an empty seat. Across from me sat this woman, approximately in her 30s. Something about her was off, though. She had this unnerving habit of constantly staring at me without breaking eye contact. I tried to ignore it at first, casually glancing away and then back, but she just kept on gazing at me with an intense focus. Here's where things took a seriously weird turn. While I was returning her gaze, I noticed her pupils undergo an inexplicable transformation. They went from their natural blue color to pitch black, right before my very eyes. I gotta admit, it sent shivers down my spine. As if that wasn't unsettling enough, the girl started whispering something to me. Unfortunately, with the train noise blasting in my ears, I couldn't make out a single word she uttered. It made me incredibly uneasy, to say the least. Thankfully, at the next stop, a guy hopped on and sat beside me. The girl's intense stare persisted, her whispers continuing as if in a trance. That's when it all took a bizarre twist. Just as I was trying to process the situation, the guy who sat next to me suddenly grabbed my sleeve and forcibly pulled me out of the subway car. I was taken aback and demanded an explanation for his unusual behavior. He hushed me and said, "Don't make a scene. I just saved your life, man. That girl is dead, and she had plans to take you down with her." Can you imagine the shock that ran through me upon hearing those words? I felt frozen, unable to move or speak. Since that haunting incident, you won't catch me on the subway anymore. It was a bone-chilling encounter that made me reevaluate my commuting choices, that's for sure. Story 4. Don't go into the forest alone at night. To be honest, this incident still gives me shivers down my spine whenever I think about it. It happened on a warm summer evening while I was heading back home from a friend's place. Our houses were pretty close, with just one ominous forest lying in between. The hour was late, and darkness enveloped everything around me. All I had was a feeble flashlight to guide my way. As I strolled along the narrow path, suddenly, I heard rustling sounds not too far from me. I immediately flicked on my flashlight, hoping to uncover the source, but to my surprise, there was nothing there. I brushed it off and continued my walk. However, after a while, I heard the rustling noise again, only this time it was much closer. A sense of unease washed over me, and I could feel my heart pounding. Instinctively, I broke into a sprint, running as fast as my legs would carry me. I didn't stop until I was completely exhausted. Gasping for air, I finally came to a halt and decided to gather my wits. With trembling hands, I aimed my flashlight around, illuminating the area, and what I saw next sent chills down my spine. There, in the dim light, I caught sight of numerous small creatures. Their faces were grotesquely disfigured, and their limbs boasted long, menacing claws. Every one of them fixed their eerie gaze upon me. An overwhelming surge of adrenaline flooded my brain, propelling me to run like I had never run before in my entire life. Thankfully, luck was on my side, as I stumbled upon a rundown shack along the way. Without a second thought, I darted inside and barricaded the door with whatever I could find within the room. Throughout the night, I could still hear faint sounds emanating from outside. The door creaked ominously, and shadows danced in the moonlight. I huddled there, petrified, waiting anxiously for morning to arrive. It wasn't until sunrise that I mustered the courage to leave the safety of the hut. As I stepped outside, my eyes fell upon a bone-chilling message scrawled on the door: "Don't go into the forest alone at night." Story 5. Emily. It all began when I stumbled upon a girl named Emily on one of those social networking sites. Honestly, our initial interactions were nothing special, just your typical small talk. But as time passed, something about her started to captivate me. Gradually, she became more intriguing, and we found out we had a ton in common. We ended up messaging each other every single night. Emily had this charm that drew me in, you know? Her words resonated with me, and it felt like we were on the same wavelength. Our conversations were deep and filled with agreement. I eagerly awaited our nightly chats like a kid on Christmas Eve. And let me tell you, her voice was like music to my ears. I kid you not, I felt like I could fall head over heels just by listening to her speak. Plus, she was drop-dead gorgeous in her photos. So, naturally, the idea of meeting her in person started to occupy my thoughts. The catch was that she lived in a different city, making it quite a challenge. But we soldiered on, and after almost a year of building this connection, I decided to bring up the idea of meeting face-to-face. To my delight, Emily was thrilled about it, and we set a date for the big day. I eagerly purchased my plane ticket, anticipating what I believed was my destined encounter. Fast forward, and I found myself in the very city where Emily resided. We exchanged phone calls, and she guided me to her place. She lived with her folks, so meeting her parents was part of the deal. Standing in front of that apartment door, the nerves kicked in like a freight train. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it could leap out of my chest any second. I mustered the courage and rang the bell, and within moments, Emily's mother opened the door. Beaming with excitement, I handed her a lovely bouquet I had picked up on my way over. But instead of the warm reception I anticipated, confusion clouded her face, and she asked the question that sent shivers down my spine. "Who are you, young man?" With joy in my voice, I replied, "I'm here to see your daughter." "Didn't Emily mention that she was expecting a guest today?" Her mother's anger flared up, and she retorted, "What nonsense are you spouting? Emily passed away a year ago. She couldn't have invited you." That's when my world came crashing down. I couldn't comprehend what was happening. It felt like a sick joke I desperately wished wasn't real. I begged for an explanation, and Emily's mother dropped the bombshell. She revealed that her daughter had tragically died in a car accident a year prior. She was just as shocked as I was to discover that her late daughter had been engaging with me through the internet and phone. To confirm this eerie revelation, we checked Emily's smartphone, which was switched off and stowed away in a closet. Lo and behold, all our messages and call logs were there, spanning nearly an entire year. There was no rational explanation for any of it. Emily didn't make any contact after that, no responses on social media or calls. It felt like I was stuck in some dream, but there was no waking up. I spent a restless night in a nearby hotel and hopped on the morning flight back home. Story 6. The Cold Hand. It all began 3 months ago when a horrific accident left me with no choice but to amputate my right hand. The surgery went well, and I started my long road to recovery. However, as the days turned into nights, a dreadful presence began to manifest itself. At first, it was mere whispers in the darkness. Whispers that I attributed to my imagination running wild. But then, as I lay alone in my bed one night, the phantom pains began. Sharp jolts of agony shot through my non-existent hand, causing me to cry out in pain. It was like my brain was betraying me, sending signals to a hand that no longer existed. Terrified, I reached out to my doctors, explaining the torment I was enduring. They assured me that such phantom pains were normal and would gradually fade with time. But little did I know that there was something far more sinister lurking beneath the surface. As weeks turned into months, the phantom pains persisted, but that was not the worst part. It was the icy touch, like frostbitten fingers, that haunted my remaining hand during the dead of night. I would wake up, feeling the cold tendrils brushing against my skin, only to find nothing there. Nothing, except the knowledge that my amputated hand was relentlessly reaching out to scratch at my flesh. It wasn't just the chilling sensation that kept me up at night. Oh no, it was the sound that accompanied it, like dry, brittle nails clawing at a wooden coffin. The horrifying scratching noise echoed through the stillness, reverberating in my ears like a desperate plea for attention. I became a prisoner in my own home, scared to close my eyes, terrified of what the night would bring. Sleep deprivation gnawed at my sanity, and my once vibrant life had transformed into an existence ruled by fear. Seeking answers, I turned to the internet, hoping to find someone who had experienced something similar. That's when I stumbled upon a forum thread with a title that made my blood run cold: Amputated Hand Hauntings, Cold Scratches and Unearthly Whispers. I wasn't alone, there were others who shared my torment. In the comments, I discovered a possible explanation: an ancient superstition that spoke of restless spirits seeking revenge for their severed limbs. They believed that if the body was deprived of its rightful burial, the spirit would forever wander, seeking solace in the living. With newfound hope, I contacted a spiritual medium, hoping they could help me appease the vengeful spirit of my amputated hand. Together, we performed a cleansing ritual, honoring the lost appendage and guiding it towards peace. The following night, as I lay in bed, I braced myself for what might come. But to my surprise, there was no scratching, no icy touch, and no whispers. The haunting presence had finally been vanquished, leaving me with a sense of relief I hadn't felt in months. Story 7. In the Shadows. It started just like any other night. My son, Timmy, was getting ready for bed, and I tucked him in snugly, preparing to read him a bedtime story. As I leaned in to give him a goodnight kiss, he looked up at me with his innocent eyes and said, "Daddy, check the monsters under the bed." Naturally, I chuckled and tried to reassure him. "There are no monsters under your bed, champ. It's all in your imagination," I said, hoping to ease his fears. But he insisted, his voice trembling with an unusual mixture of fear and urgency. Something about his expression sent a chill down my spine. I couldn't ignore the unease that welled up within me, so I crouched down, peering beneath the bed frame. What I saw left me paralyzed with terror. Lying there, curled up in the shadows, was another child. It was Timmy, or at least someone who looked exactly like him. His wide eyes met mine, reflecting a sheer terror that chilled me to my core. In a quivering voice, he whispered, "Dad, there is someone else in my bed." A cold sweat instantly coated my body as I turned my gaze toward Timmy's bed. My heart sank as I noticed a figure, barely discernible in the dim light, lying beside his pillow. I felt the room grow colder, and the air seemed thick with an otherworldly presence. My instincts screamed at me to protect my son, but every fiber of my being froze in fear. Summoning every ounce of courage I had left, I mustered a weak, "Who are you?" A hollow laugh echoed through the room, sending shivers down my spine. The figure beside Timmy began to stir, revealing a face obscured by darkness. It spoke in a chilling, distorted voice that seemed to come from deep within the pits of despair. It hissed, "You thought you could protect him. But you can't protect him from me." My mind raced, desperately trying to process what was happening. Was this some sort of twisted nightmare? Had I stumbled upon an unspeakable evil lurking beneath my own roof? Panic coursed through my veins, but I knew I couldn't let fear consume me. Without hesitation, I lunged toward the figure, ready to defend my son at all costs. But as my hand passed through the shadowy figure, it dissipated like smoke, leaving me grasping at empty air. It was a fleeting moment, a mere phantom. I turned my attention back to Timmy, pulling him away from the sinister doppelganger lying in his bed. Holding him tightly, I whispered, "Don't worry, buddy. Daddy's got you. We'll figure this out together." We stayed up all night, barricading the doors and windows, hoping that whatever malevolent force had infiltrated our lives would stay at bay. But when dawn finally broke, we were met with an eerie discovery. The dark entity that had plagued us throughout the night had vanished without a trace. The house, which had felt heavy and oppressive, suddenly felt empty and devoid of the malicious energy that had gripped it just hours before. It was as if the very air had exhaled a sigh of relief. Timmy and I cautiously searched every corner, room by room, but there was no sign of the intruder or any remnants of its presence. It was as if the terrifying episode had been nothing more than a terrifying hallucination. As relieved as I was, a sense of unease lingered. How could something so menacing simply vanish? Was it merely biding its time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again? Questions swirled in my mind, each more chilling than the last. Now I find myself at a crossroads. Do I dismiss this as a one-time supernatural encounter and try to move on with our lives, or do I continue to dig deeper, desperate for answers and determined to protect my son? Story 8. The Sinister Reflection. It started like any ordinary night. I had just dozed off, seeking solace in my cozy bedroom. The night was still, the silence only broken by the faint chirping of crickets. That was until a sudden noise jolted me awake. Knock knock. I groggily rubbed my eyes, thinking it was someone knocking on my bedroom window. My heart raced, imagining all sorts of terrifying scenarios. But little did I know, the real horror was yet to come. Another knock reverberated through the room, but this time it sounded different. It seemed to originate from a source that sent shivers down my spine. Knock knock. That's when I noticed it, a slow, deliberate tapping coming from my mirror. My heart pounded in my chest as I gazed at my reflection, unsure of what I was about to witness. The room grew colder, the air heavy with an ominous presence. The mirror's surface seemed to distort, the reflection becoming darker and more sinister. My own eyes stared back at me, but there was something off, something malevolent. I could feel the grip of fear tightening around my throat. Unable to tear my gaze away, I watched in horror as my reflection began to move independently of me. It smirked, its lips stretching into a twisted grin that sent chills down my spine. The knocking continued, growing louder and more insistent with each passing moment. My heart raced, and my mind was consumed with panic. I stumbled backward, crashing into my bed. But no matter where I turned, the relentless tapping followed me, echoing through the room, gnawing at my sanity. The room plunged into darkness as if the very light had been devoured by the malevolent force lurking within the mirror. Panic and terror engulfed me as I realized I was trapped in a nightmarish realm. With trembling hands, I summoned the courage to break the spell. I darted towards the mirror, my heart pounding with every step. My reflection watched with malicious glee as I reached out, my fingers trembling as they made contact with the cold, glass surface. And then, everything stopped. Silence descended upon the room, suffocating me with its weight. The knocking ceased, the reflection returning to its passive state. I stumbled backward, gasping for air, my mind reeling from the encounter. But the horror wasn't over. As I turned away from the mirror, my eyes caught a glimpse of movement in the corner. I slowly turned my head, and there it was, an identical reflection, lurking behind me in the darkness. Its eyes bore into mine, filled with an insatiable hunger. I bolted for the door, fleeing from the room, my mind on the brink of collapse. The echoes of the knocking and the sinister reflection haunted me, a constant reminder of the terror I had experienced. I've moved since that fateful night, vowing never to have a mirror in my bedroom again. But even now, the memory of that encounter lingers, a chilling reminder that sometimes, the darkness has a way of manifesting in ways we cannot comprehend. Story 9. High-rise horror. This happened a week ago. Picture this, I'm peacefully lying in bed on the 26th floor, ready to drift off into dreamland. Just as I'm about to fall asleep, I catch a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. My heart skips a beat as I turn to look, only to come face to face with an image that will forever haunt my nightmares. There, staring at me from the pitch-black abyss outside my bedroom window, was a smiling face. Yes, you read that right, 26 floors up in the air, and I'm being watched by a grinning presence. It was as if a malevolent force had materialized itself on my window ledge. Needless to say, I was paralyzed with fear. How was this even possible? Was it a trick of the light? My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation, but deep down, I knew this was far from normal. This was something otherworldly. The face, with its sickening smile, seemed to radiate an unholy aura. Its eyes pierced through me, revealing a darkness that sent chills down my spine. I felt a rising sense of dread as if I had somehow stumbled upon a malevolent entity that had no business being on the 26th floor. I quickly reached for my phone to document this bizarre occurrence, to capture evidence of the impossible. But as I fumbled with my trembling hands, the face disappeared, leaving me in a state of disbelief. The darkness outside returned to its empty state as if nothing had happened at all. The next night this smiling face returned, and its presence is growing more insidious by the day. Last night, as I lay in bed, that same eerie sensation washed over me. Dread clung to the air, suffocating any semblance of peace. And then, there it was, the face, grinning maniacally from the inky darkness beyond my window. This time, though, it was closer. Much closer. I could see its eyes, devoid of any humanity, fixated on me with an unholy hunger. The grin seemed wider, more grotesque, as if it relished in my fear. My blood turned to ice as I realized that it wasn't just watching anymore, it was beckoning me. I mustered the courage to speak, my voice quivering with a mixture of terror and anger. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, hoping for some semblance of an answer. But the face remained silent, its smile twisting into something more macabre. I've tried everything to escape its gaze, from drawing curtains to covering the window entirely, but nothing seems to deter it. It's as if this grinning presence has become an unwelcome resident of my high-rise nightmare. Today I packed my belongings hastily, leaving behind the place that had become a prison of fear and despair. The memories of that face haunted me every step of the way, but I remained resolute in my decision to escape. Now, in a new abode far from that dreaded high-rise, a glimmer of hope has emerged. The face hasn't followed me. Its presence seems tethered to that specific location, and for now, I can breathe a sigh of relief. I'm still on edge, fearing that the face may return, but for the first time in what feels like an eternity, I sense a flicker of peace. Perhaps, just perhaps, this is the end of the nightmare. Story 10. The Return of Buddy. It all started when our beloved family dog, Buddy, ran away from home over a year ago. We were devastated. But 3 days ago he mysteriously returned, bringing an evil presence that has left us paralyzed with fear. We thought we'd lost him forever, but when my little sister, Sarah, spotted Buddy skulking outside our window, our hearts swelled with joy. We rushed to the door, tears streaming down our faces, and let him in. At first, everything seemed normal. Buddy wagged his tail and licked our faces, just as he always did. However, it didn't take long to realize that something was terribly wrong. Buddy's once vibrant eyes were now soulless orbs, devoid of life. His fur was matted and disheveled, his once sturdy body now frail and emaciated. But the most disturbing change was his behavior. Gone was the friendly and playful Buddy we once knew. Instead, he moved with an eerie grace, his every step exuding an otherworldly menace. At night, strange occurrences began plaguing our home. We'd hear footsteps in the hallway, but when we investigated, there was no one there. Doors creaked open and slammed shut, seemingly of their own accord. Terrifying whispers echoed through the house, taunting us with their unintelligible words. Worst of all, shadows danced on the walls, contorting into sinister shapes that seemed to watch our every move. The atmosphere in our once happy household grew increasingly tense. My parents argued constantly, their nerves frayed by the unexplained phenomena. Sarah, normally a bubbly and carefree child, became withdrawn and plagued by nightmares. Even I, the skeptic of the family, could no longer deny the sinister presence that had latched onto Buddy. Desperate for answers, I turned to the internet for help. That's when I stumbled upon a thread discussing ancient demonic rituals, summoning unspeakable horrors from the beyond. As I read through the chilling accounts, I realized that Buddy's transformation aligned disturbingly well with the descriptions of demonic possession. Fearing for our lives, I begged my family to part ways with Buddy, but they refused, clinging to the hope that our furry friend could be saved. With no other options, I reached out to a local paranormal investigator, hoping they could rid our home of the evil that had taken hold. The investigator arrived the next evening, armed with an array of mystical artifacts and an air of confidence that seemed to falter slightly upon meeting Buddy. As he ventured into the house, I watched from the corner, clutching a crucifix tightly in my hand. The night was long and harrowing. The investigator performed rituals, muttered incantations, and scattered blessed salt throughout the house. Buddy howled in agony, his unearthly cries echoing through the walls, as if the demons within him fought against the cleansing process. Time seemed to stretch endlessly, and fear gripped my heart. Finally, as the sun began to rise, the investigator emerged from our now quiet home. Sweat dripped down his forehead, but a triumphant smile adorned his face. He explained that after an intense battle, he had successfully exorcised the demonic presence from Buddy's body. Relief washed over us like a cleansing wave. We watched in awe as Buddy's eyes regained their familiar sparkle, his fur regained its luster, and his once frail body regained its strength. It was as if he had been reborn, freed from the clutches of darkness. The investigator assured us that the ritual had severed the connection to the demonic realm, and Buddy was no longer a vessel for evil. He recommended keeping a watchful eye on him, just to be safe, but we felt a renewed sense of hope and trust. With Buddy's demonic nature banished, our home slowly regained its peaceful ambience. The eerie whispers and malicious shadows ceased to exist, replaced by warmth and tranquility. The nightmare was over, and we could finally breathe easy. Buddy returned to his playful self, bounding through the house with an enthusiasm we hadn't seen in ages. The bond we shared with him felt stronger than ever, as if the ordeal had brought us closer together. We remain cautious, knowing that evil can lurk in unexpected places, but we refuse to let fear consume us. Story 11. The Haunting Doorway to Darkness. It all began innocently enough. My sister, Laura, and I were playing in the basement, searching for a box of old toys. While rummaging through the clutter, we noticed something peculiar, a door that we'd never seen before. It was old, covered in dust, and had an eerie aura about it. Curiosity got the best of us. We had to open that door and see what lay beyond. Slowly, we turned the rusty handle, and the door creaked open to reveal a dimly lit room. The air was heavy with an unsettling atmosphere that sent chills down our spines. As we stepped into the gloom, our eyes were drawn to a worn-out book lying on a dusty table. There were candles and matches on the table, so we lit them to get a better view. The book was filled with strange symbols and cryptic spells. Realizing it belonged to a witch who once inhabited our house, we hesitated. But our youthful curiosity pushed us forward, and against our better judgment, we decided to read one of the spells aloud. As the final word escaped our lips, a cold wind abruptly swept through the room, extinguishing the candles and plunging us into complete darkness. Panic set in, and in the next moment we found ourselves standing on the threshold of our house. We rushed upstairs, desperate to share our unearthly encounter with our parents. They looked at us with skepticism, but curiosity led them to investigate. We led them back down to the basement, only to discover that the door we had found was no longer there. It was as if it had never existed, a mere figment of our imagination. Terrified and bewildered, we could do nothing but accept the chilling reality that we had unknowingly dabbled with dark forces. Something in that room had whisked us away, only to erase any evidence of its existence. The memories of that encounter haunt us to this day. Now, we live with the constant fear that the witch's presence still lingers in the hidden corners of our home. We hear whispers in the night and catch glimpses of shadowy figures out of the corner of our eyes. We know she is watching. Story 12. The Midnight Train. So picture this, it's past midnight, and I find myself on a deserted train, heading towards an unfamiliar town. The train is eerily quiet, with only a few scattered passengers, including me. The compartment is dimly lit, adding an extra layer of mystery to the atmosphere. Little did I know, my journey was about to take a horrifying turn. I was minding my own business, scrolling through the news on my phone, trying to pass the time when I noticed something strange out of the corner of my eye. A man at the end of the train car was acting strangely, muttering incomprehensible words and pacing back and forth. He seemed anxious and restless. Curiosity got the best of me, and against my better judgment, I approached him cautiously. I asked if everything was all right, but instead of responding, he turned to face me. That's when I saw it, his face contorted in pain, transforming into something sinister. It was a werewolf, right before my eyes. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The werewolf let out a bone-chilling howl, causing the other passengers to stir with fear. Panic ensued as the creature's transformation continued, limbs stretching, clothes tearing apart. I could hear terrified screams echoing through the train car. Desperate for survival, passengers frantically searched for a way to stop this nightmare. One brave soul managed to locate the emergency stop valve and pulled it with all their might. The train screeched to a halt, shaking violently, as the werewolf continued its rampage within the confined space. In the chaos, the train doors flew open, and the creature, now fully transformed, made a break for freedom. It leaped out of the train and into the darkness of the nearby forest, disappearing into the night. As the train car fell into a fearful silence, the remaining passengers took a moment to catch their breath. The nightmare had ended, at least for now. The authorities were notified, and a search party was organized to locate the werewolf and ensure the safety of the surrounding area. The following days were filled with whispers and rumors. The local townsfolk spoke of a mysterious creature that haunted the nearby woods, preying on unsuspecting travelers. Some claimed it was a cursed soul, while others believed it to be a manifestation of ancient folklore. Regardless of the stories, one thing was clear: the encounter on that midnight train had changed us all. We were now witnesses to the existence of something beyond our comprehension, something dark and supernatural. Story 13. The Teacher's Secret. I'm a high school student, and I'm convinced that my teacher is a monster. I know it sounds crazy, but hear me out. It all started innocently enough. Miss Hartley, our new English teacher, arrived at the beginning of the semester. She had a disarming smile, and her lectures were engaging. But there was something off about her, something that sent chills down my spine. During class, she would fixate her gaze on me, her eyes resembling that of a predator stalking its prey. Whenever I would meet her stare, a sinister grin would creep across her face. It was as if she took pleasure in my discomfort. Things escalated quickly. I started having nightmares, vivid and terrifying. They always featured Miss Hartley as a grotesque creature, hunting me down in a nightmarish landscape. I couldn't shake the feeling that these dreams were more than just figments of my imagination. One day, I stayed behind after school to gather my courage and investigate her classroom. I rummaged through her desk and found a hidden compartment, filled with strange trinkets, a vial of murky liquid, an ancient-looking talisman, and a weathered diary. Leafing through its pages, I discovered horrifying sketches of the very nightmares that plagued me. My heart raced as I read the entries, describing rituals and sacrifices, all centered around the students of our school. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Miss Hartley was not only a monster but a dangerous one at that. I tried telling my friends, my parents, even the principal about Miss Hartley's true nature, but they all dismissed me as delusional. They chalked it up to stress or overactive imagination. But I can't let this go. I refuse to become one of her victims. I've reached out to paranormal experts and even local law enforcement, but they either ignore my pleas or treat me like a joke. No one believed me. But today, something incredible happened. A journalist, who stumbled upon my desperate posts, reached out to me. She believed me and wanted to investigate the matter further. Together, we devised a plan to catch Miss Hartley in the act. Armed with cameras and recording devices, we attended her next class. As she taught, I could feel her malevolence radiating from every word. But this time, I had proof. The journalist, who we'll call Sarah, had done her homework. She knew about the monster's vulnerability to silver. In a daring move, Sarah secretly slipped a silver necklace into Miss Hartley's belongings, carefully hidden among her personal items. As the class continued, tension filled the room. Sarah had instructed me to engage Miss Hartley in a conversation about ancient artifacts, unknowingly drawing her attention closer to the necklace. The moment she touched it, a gasp escaped her lips, and her true nature emerged. She transformed before our eyes, a grotesque, monstrous being with fangs and claws. The room erupted in chaos, students screaming and scrambling to escape. But Sarah and I stood our ground. We knew that capturing this pivotal moment on camera was essential. Amidst the chaos, Sarah courageously faced the monster, capturing its transformation and menacing presence on camera. The monster ran away from school. The evidence we gathered was irrefutable. Ms. Hartley was arrested. And I can finally breathe again. The nightmare is over. Story 14. The Unseen Observer. Part 1. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, where everyone knows each other, or at least, that's what I thought. There's this one house directly across the street from mine that's been vacant for as long as I can remember. No one has lived there for years, and it's always been a bit eerie. But lately, things have taken a twisted turn. I started noticing movement inside that abandoned house, day and night. At first, I brushed it off as my imagination playing tricks on me. But as days went by, I realized it was real. Someone was watching me from those darkened windows. Every time I looked up, their eyes met mine, and I could feel the chills run down my spine. It was like they were studying my every move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I've become paranoid, checking my doors and windows multiple times a day. Sleep has become a distant memory as I lie awake, fearing what could happen next. The worst part is, no one believes me. When I mentioned it to my friends and family, they dismissed it as an overactive imagination or stress. But I know what I saw, and I can't shake the feeling that something sinister is going on. The person in the house never shows themselves fully, it's just a shadowy figure lurking behind the curtains. It's impossible to see their face or make out any defining features. But I know they're watching, waiting for me to let my guard down. Part 2. Things took a disturbing turn. Last night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a faint tapping sound coming from my bedroom window. My heart pounded against my chest as I mustered the courage to investigate. Slowly, I drew back the curtains, and there it was, a message etched into the glass from the outside, written in a twisted, menacing handwriting. It read, "I'm closer than you think." I screamed and called the police, but by the time they arrived, the message had mysteriously disappeared. They searched the area, but as expected, they found nothing. They assured me it was probably just some prankster, but deep down, I know it's more than that. This person is playing with me, toying with my sanity. I've had enough. I can't live like this anymore. The fear has consumed me, and I feel like I'm losing my grip on reality. I've decided to take matters into my own hands. Today, armed with a camera and my phone, I'll capture evidence of this sinister stalker. I positioned myself strategically, peering out my window, ready to catch them in the act. Minutes turned into hours, and my patience wore thin. Just as I was about to give up, a flash of movement caught my attention. The figure stepped into view, their face still hidden, but their intentions unmistakable. I snapped several pictures, documenting the figure's presence. But as soon as the flash went off, they vanished, leaving me shaken and alone. I rushed to review the photos, hoping to catch a glimpse of the person's face, but to my dismay, they were nothing more than blurred shapes in the darkness. I'm terrified. I've tried involving the authorities, but without concrete evidence, they can't do much. I don't know what to do anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I feel their presence, like they're watching me even in my dreams. Part 3. In 2 days, I received an SMS from someone claiming to have information about the house and the figure lurking within. Skeptical yet hopeful, I arranged a meeting with this anonymous informant. We met in a quiet coffee shop, and what they revealed sent shivers down my spine. As it turns out, the house had been sold a few months ago to a reclusive individual named Mr. Daniels. He was known for his odd behavior and eccentric lifestyle, often venturing out only at night. While many suspected he was harmless, my informant had gathered some compelling evidence that suggested otherwise. After hours of digging and connecting the dots, my anonymous ally discovered a disturbing pattern. Mr. Daniels had a dark past, involving several unsolved disappearances in the neighborhoods he had previously lived in. It seemed he had a penchant for stalking his victims before making his move. The evidence was chilling, and the more we uncovered, the more it became clear that I was his latest target. Armed with this newfound knowledge, I immediately presented the evidence to the police. They launched a full investigation into Mr. Daniels, searching his house and questioning him intensively. The outcome was as horrific as it was relieving. They found a secret room hidden beneath the basement floor, a chamber of nightmares. Inside were newspaper clippings, photographs, and personal belongings of his previous victims. It was a grim testament to the horrors he had inflicted upon others. As for Mr. Daniels himself, he had vanished, leaving no trace behind. The authorities have issued a nationwide manhunt to capture this deranged individual, but until he is apprehended, I remain cautious. I've taken extra precautions to secure my safety, including moving to a different neighborhood altogether. The sense of relief I feel is unparalleled, but the trauma of this experience will linger for a long time. Story 15. I think aliens have replaced my family. I've always been a skeptic when it comes to conspiracy theories, but lately, I can't shake this eerie feeling that my family has been replaced by aliens. Yes, you heard that right, actual extraterrestrial beings. It all started a few weeks ago when I noticed subtle changes in their behavior. They used to be warm and affectionate, but now, their interactions feel forced and unnatural. Their smiles don't quite reach their eyes, and their laughter sounds off, almost mechanical. It's as if they're imitating human emotions rather than genuinely feeling them. The first time I really started to question things was during a family dinner. We were gathered around the table, eating our usual Sunday roast, when my sister, Emily, dropped her fork. The clattering sound echoed through the room, and she just stared at it. Her expression remained blank for an uncomfortably long time, and then she smiled, an unsettling, wide grin that made my blood run cold. "What's wrong, Emily?" I asked, trying to mask the tremor in my voice. "Nothing at all," she replied, her tone unnaturally cheery. "Just a momentary lapse. Carry on." Something was definitely wrong, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I decided to dig deeper and started researching online. Turns out, there are countless stories about aliens impersonating humans. I thought they were pure fiction, but now I'm not so sure. The next day, while rifling through my parents' bedroom, I discovered a strange journal hidden under their mattress. The pages were filled with cryptic symbols and diagrams that made no sense to me. It was as if I had stumbled upon some extraterrestrial language. Goosebumps formed on my arms as I leafed through the pages, realizing that my suspicions were becoming more and more real. I decided to confront my parents, hoping for an explanation or at least a reassurance that I was wrong. I sat them down in the living room and spilled everything, showing them the journal and expressing my concerns. To my surprise, their faces contorted into expressions of anger and hostility, their eyes taking on an otherworldly glow. It was then that I knew these were not my parents. They were imposters. In a panic, I bolted for the front door, but before I could escape, I felt a sharp pain in the back of my head. Darkness swallowed me whole, and when I regained consciousness, I found myself in an unfamiliar place. It was cold, sterile, a laboratory of some sort. I was restrained on a metallic table, surrounded by beings that resembled a grotesque mix of human and alien features. One of them approached me, its voice a distorted hiss. "We have been watching you, human. You were getting too close to the truth, so we had to intervene. Your family was an experiment, a test to see if we could infiltrate human society undetected. You were the anomaly we needed to remove." Terror gripped every fiber of my being, but amidst the fear, a surge of determination welled up inside me. I couldn't let these creatures succeed in their sinister plot. With every ounce of strength I could muster, I fought against my restraints, desperately seeking a way to escape. My hands finally broke free, and I scrambled off the table, knocking over equipment as I raced toward the exit. Alarms blared, and the facility was thrown into chaos. I stumbled through dimly lit corridors, dodging guards and unfamiliar creatures, fueled by a primal instinct to survive. As I reached the exit, a blinding light enveloped me, and I found myself hurtling through the air. The next thing I knew, I was back in my neighborhood, lying on the pavement, bruised and battered. It seemed like the aliens had abandoned their plan, at least for now. So here I am, battered but alive, sharing my story with you in the hopes that someone out there can make sense of all this. I can't trust anyone anymore. The aliens are among us, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Stay vigilant, they could be right beside you, masquerading as the ones you love. Story 16. The Forgotten Sister. Brace yourselves for a bone-chilling tale that will send shivers down your spine. You won't believe what happened to a woman named Rose when she stumbled upon an old 16mm film from her childhood. This is a story that will make your blood run cold. It all began when Rose was cleaning out her late grandmother's attic. Amongst the boxes filled with forgotten treasures, she stumbled upon a dusty old film reel, labeled Family Memories, 1990. Curiosity gripped her as she recalled her lonely childhood, wondering what secrets this film might hold. Eager to relive the past, Rose found an ancient projector and carefully threaded the film. The flickering light of the projector cast eerie shadows around the room, setting the stage for the horrifying revelations about to unfold. As the film played, the crackling soundtrack echoed through the empty room. Rose's eyes widened with disbelief as she watched her younger self frolicking in the sunshine. But something was off. In every scene, Rose was accompanied by a mysterious girl, her long-lost sister, a sibling she never knew she had. As the film progressed, Rose noticed something unsettling. Her sister seemed different, unsettlingly so. Her pale complexion and sunken eyes gave her an otherworldly appearance, and a sense of unease washed over Rose like an icy wave. Intrigued and unnerved, Rose delved deeper into her family's history. She reached out to her parents, demanding answers about her forgotten sister. However, their responses were chillingly vague, evasive even. It was as if they were hiding something, a dark secret they were desperate to keep buried. Undeterred, Rose scoured old photo albums and faded newspaper clippings, determined to unravel the truth. And what she discovered sent a shiver down her spine. In a hidden corner of the attic, Rose stumbled upon a musty old journal. It belonged to her grandmother, a journal filled with cryptic entries about a troubled child named Lily, her long-lost sister. The entries spoke of strange occurrences, unexplained phenomena, and a darkness that seemed to surround Lily. Rose's heart pounded in her chest as she read the last entry, revealing the devastating truth. Lily had been born with a curse, a malevolent entity had possessed her at birth. The family, desperate to protect their eldest daughter, made a horrifying decision. They sealed Lily away in a secret room beneath the house, condemning her to a life of isolation and darkness. Fueled by a mix of dread and determination, Rose couldn't resist the urge to uncover the truth behind Lily's torment. Armed with a flashlight, she descended into the hidden depths of her family home, the air thick with an oppressive sense of foreboding. The basement was a labyrinth of forgotten secrets, its cold walls echoing with the whispers of the past. Rose's heart raced as she stumbled upon a concealed door, covered in symbols of ancient occult rituals. With trembling hands, Rose pushed open the door, revealing a room shrouded in darkness. Within, she found remnants of a long-lost childhood, a tattered teddy bear, decaying drawings, and chilling messages etched into the walls. As Rose's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows across the room, she felt an icy breath on the back of her neck. A voice, barely more than a whisper, slithered into her ears, "You should never have come here." Panicking, Rose turned to flee, but her path was blocked by a figure emerging from the darkness, Lily, her long-lost sister. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and a malicious grin stretched across her face. In a chilling voice, Lily hissed, "You have awakened me from my eternal slumber. Now, you shall join me in the darkness forever." And that is where Rose's story ends. Some say she vanished without a trace, her fate forever intertwined with her sister's tortured soul. Others claim to have heard whispers in the night, echoes of a family forever haunted by the sins of their past. So, next time you stumble upon an old film or unearth a forgotten secret, remember the cautionary tale of Rose and her sinister sister, Lily. Some truths are better left buried, and some mysteries are best left unsolved. Story 17. My daughter's imaginary friend is not imaginary. It all started innocently enough when my 5-year-old daughter, Mary, developed an imaginary friend. Kids and their imaginations, right? But let me tell you, things took a terrifying turn when I realized her so-called imaginary friend wasn't so imaginary after all. About a month ago, Mary started talking about her new friend, Mr. Tickles. At first, my husband and I found it cute and assumed it was just another one of her imaginary playmates. But then Mary started describing Mr. Tickles with chilling accuracy. She said he had long, bony fingers and wore a tattered suit that was stained with what she called dried blood. As days went by, strange things started happening around our house. We would find objects moved or misplaced, hear odd noises during the night, and even catch glimpses of a shadowy figure out of the corner of our eyes. Mary would laugh and say it was just Mr. Tickles playing tricks on us, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was lurking. Desperate for answers, I turned to the internet to research any information about Mr. Tickles. To my surprise, I stumbled upon a disturbing news article from a decade ago. The article described a man named Harold Tickles, a former children's entertainer who went missing under mysterious circumstances. The details matched Mary's description eerily well. Filled with dread, I confronted Mary about what I had discovered. She innocently shrugged and said, "Mr. Tickles told me his secret. He used to be a clown, but he did bad things." The words sent chills down my spine as I realized the horrifying truth. Mary's imaginary friend was the ghost of a deranged clown who had somehow attached itself to her. As days turned into weeks, our lives became a nightmare. Mr. Tickles grew increasingly malevolent, tormenting us relentlessly. We would wake up with scratches on our bodies, find disturbing drawings on the walls, and hear menacing whispers in our ears. The atmosphere in our once happy home turned suffocating, driving us to the brink of madness. Fearful for our safety, we sought the assistance of a renowned paranormal investigator. He delved into the history of our house and discovered that it was built on the site of an old circus, where Harold Tickles used to perform. It seemed that the sinister energy of the past had awakened his vengeful spirit. Armed with this knowledge, the paranormal investigator performed a complex ritual to cleanse our home of the malevolent presence. We watched in anticipation as the house was engulfed in an otherworldly light, and the air grew thick with tension. Suddenly, Mr. Tickles materialized before us, his demonic grin frozen on his face. With a final, ear-piercing shriek, he vanished into thin air. Ever since that fateful day, our house has returned to normal. The scratches, whispers, and terrifying encounters are a thing of the past. Mary no longer talks about Mr. Tickles, and her laughter has returned, filling our lives with joy once again. But the memories of that horrifying ordeal still haunt us, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath a child's innocent imagination.